and welcome to The Edge. Well, we're taking in-depth analysis of today's top stories by looking beyond the edge. We'll bring you not just the facts, but also deep insights into the topics with expert opinions and social media reactions. Let's make a start with our look beyond the edge. Hundreds of thousands of Palestinians were forced to flee their homeland due to the Israeli occupation. But not all of them are satisfied with the conditions in which they have to live now. Palestinians in Lebanon have to live in overcrowded camps with poor housing conditions and a lack of basic facilities. What needs to be done to improve their conditions? A report on child abuse by Catholic clergymen in France has revealed the shocking reality that over 200,000 children have been sexually abused in French churches since 1950. The Commission spent over 2.5 years investigating sexual abuse in the Roman Catholic Church in France from 1950 to 2002. The scandal in France is the latest to hit the Catholic Church, which has been rocked by sexual abuse scandals around the world, often involving children, over the past 20 years. What will be the after effects of this church abuse revelation? And Tunisia closed a television station that has been strongly critical of President Kais Saied since he seized most powers in July in a move his foes call a coup. Broadcasting authorities accuse the station of operating illegally for years. The closure of the TV station takes place against the backdrop of the July power grab by President Kais Saied, opposed by the Ennahda and Al-Karama parties. How will the political crisis in Tunisia continue to unfold? And these are the top 3 topics that we'll be taking a look at today from Beyond the Edge. Let's get started. Following the 1948 Nakba, hundreds of thousands of Palestinians were forced to flee their homeland to seek refuge from the Israeli occupation. But what of those who managed to escape to Lebanon? Let's take a look at this infographic for more details. Palestinian refugees living in Lebanon are continuing to struggle in their daily lives as they attempt to obtain basic human rights amid one of the worst financial meltdowns in the country.
Palestinian or Lebanese? A question asked often by those born in Lebanon but with Palestinian roots. The 1948 Nakba and its effects are still ongoing for Palestinians abroad, especially those in Lebanon where they are not recognised as refugees. Nearly 500,000 Palestinian refugees in Lebanon are registered with the United Nations Relief and Works Agency. However, other data suggests that the number is closer to 192,000, including those who came from Syria during the war. Refugees currently live in 12 overcrowded camps in poor conditions across parts of Lebanon. Palestinians in Lebanon are deprived of several rights, especially the right to own property and work in almost 39 professions, which has led to high unemployment rates. Data published in 2015 showed that 65% of Palestinians in Lebanon lived below the poverty line and that Palestinian unemployment rates had reached 56%. These numbers are most definitely higher today due to the deep economic collapse affecting Lebanon. The United Nations Relief and Works Agency has expressed its concern over the rapid deterioration in Lebanon, sounding an alarm over its effects on Palestinians. Lebanese residents are struggling to survive amid an economic collapse in the country, which is also deeply affecting Palestinians and refugees who make up some of the most vulnerable parts of the community.
And to discuss the conditions in the refugee camps in Lebanon and the creative ways that people are looking to improve their lives there, I'm joined live in the studio by Palestinian entrepreneur Hussein Zaid. Hussein, thank you so much for joining us here today on The Edge.
Thank you, Andy.
You're visiting Turkey from Lebanon. You're normally based in Tripoli and in the refugee camp there. Can I start? Can you explain to me, what is life like in a refugee camp? I got lots of different pictures in my head, thinking of the Syrian refugees in northern Syria with the tent camps and so on. But that's not exactly how it is in Lebanon, is it?
Well, basically, the refugees in Lebanon are, we can say, long-term refugees. They are there since 73 years, since 1948. So now it's not tent-based camps. It's normally buildings, but with very condensed population, poverty, unemployment, a crucial situation there.
So who is actually running the camps? Who is, as refugees, how are people paying for their daily lives? Or are they, like me, paying their bills for water and electricity, or if they want to buy a house, do they have to buy their houses?
So basically, the responsible party on the camps is UNRWA, which is a UN institution, which was established after the Nakba in 1948. UNRWA collaborate with the Palestinian factions inside the camps, and also there is collaboration with the Lebanese authorities. So it's, let's say, it's a combination of roles inside the camps. People in the camps can't buy their houses. They are prohibited from buying houses. They can't have they can't have houses in their names. So this is a rule in the Lebanese authority policies.
So if they can't have a house in their own name, are they, that's ownership, but I imagine, are people then renting their houses? How are people assigned houses?
Yes, this rule is a bit new. It's since around 20 years or maybe 20 or 30 years. So before that, Palestinian people can own houses, but now they can't. So now they can have their houses in Lebanese names, or they can rent houses or something like this. Inside the camp, the Lebanese government don't have a lot role inside. So it's like this, people build houses without Aslan registering the houses.
And I imagine that goes the same for infrastructure as well, for electricity and so on.
Yeah, basically the UNRWA is taking responsibility regarding this.
So very ad hoc, mixed thing. What about some things on our graphics? We've got food. So what about food? Are there shops?
Yes, there are shops inside the camps, but people inside the camp go and buy their food from also outside the camp,
right.
From inside and outside. They have, let's say, the freedom to go outside the camps, but everything else, the schools of UNRWA, the UNRWA clinics are based inside the camp. So, yeah, something like this.
So education and healthcare is provided by UNRWA?
Exactly, but I don't know if we can say that this is healthcare, because it's very getting worse year by year because there's a financial crisis in UNRWA.
And so there's, yes, the UNRWA have had funds withheld from the United States, we know, and probably from others, which is a very serious situation that needs to be addressed very rapidly. And on top of that, there's the financial crisis in Lebanon. Is that impacting life in the camp, or is life in Lebanon totally separate from life in the camp?
It impacts it very badly. Maybe if we can use some statistics, the poverty rates inside the camps was around 60%. But now, after the crisis, after the blast and Beirut blast, after the financial crisis, everything, after Corona, now the poverty rates might reach around 95%.
95%?
Yes, the unemployment rate is around 90% now after the crisis, so this is madness.
Absolutely. So are people able to earn a living, or can they make a living in the camp, or are they able to go into Lebanon to work?
Most of them, they can't. They are now waiting to receive cash from outside, from their neighbors living abroad. Most of them, they can't make their living.
So this begs the question, how do people, if they can't make a living, if they don't have relatives who are able to send money, how do people survive from day to day? In the camps in Lebanon, let's say, there are a lot of statistics, but I can say there's around 200,000 refugees, maybe more, maybe less. So most of them have neighbors outside. If we take a look about the number of refugees around the world, we are around 7 million around the world. So Palestinian refugees in the Gulf, they send some cash assistance, let's say, in Europe, in the USA. Inside the camp, people have some work. There are some employees in UNRWA itself. So UNRWA have a goal to create work opportunities for the Palestinian refugees. And some people work, some refugees work in the Lebanese community. Not much, because the Palestinian refugees can't work in around 35 jobs. This is they are prohibited from working in 35 jobs. This is by the Lebanese authorities. So it's a bit hard, but people are struggling to live. So these 35 jobs, I assume, include professional roles. So somebody who might be qualified as a doctor or a teacher or a nurse or whatever, that can't work in those jobs.
Exactly. This is the bad thing, that most of them are professions, are the doctors, engineers. The Palestinian refugees, they graduate from universities, and it's well known that Palestinian refugees are hard workers, are tedious, are good in studying and in universities. They graduate with very high scores, but they don't find a job. They can't work in Lebanon. Many of them try to immigrate, to go to Gulf, to Europe, but it's really hard. They can't go because they don't have travel documents. They don't have an official passport. They don't have a Palestinian passport, by the way.
How can they, if they're a Palestinian refugee, so they must have papers that they're Palestinian, or if they grew up and lived in Lebanon, they must have some status in Lebanon, do they not?
So I can talk from a personal experience.
Okay.
We don't have a Palestinian passport.
Right.
We are Palestinians, but we don't have a Palestinian passport. We can't go to Palestine in any way. No way to go to Palestine. We only have the chance to live in Lebanon only. So instead, we don't have, by the way, ID cards, the plastic ID cards. We have some big paper. Can I show it to you?
Yeah, please.
So this is the ID we have. It's a paper.
Mm-hmm, a laminated paper.
It's very old. It's handwritten, by the way.
Really?
Until now, after 73 years, we don't have plastic ID cards, which in the gym and in libraries and even in the transportation they issue like this. So this is our ID, and this is not a Palestinian ID, by the way. This is an ID issued by the Lebanese authorities, just to have our names and something like this. So this is a بطاقة خاصة باللاجئين الفلسطينيين, a special card for Palestinian refugees. So this is our ID.
So if Lebanon is recognizing your status there, then by giving you a card, it's a recognition at the end of the day. If they're recognizing it on that blue card, they should surely recognize your status as human beings able to function in the Lebanese society.
There's a lot of conflict between the Lebanese parties, the Lebanese political parties. So this issue, since 73 years, is still unsolved. We think that there's a problem in communication itself. The base of the problem is there's no real communication between the Lebanese and the Palestinian refugees. This card is an example of this, because it's a trivial thing to issue a card for any human being. So I think this might be an example about the whole situation. So we are not Lebanese citizens. We don't have Lebanese citizenship or any Lebanese identity, and we are not also Palestinian citizens. So this is very, very confusing. When we travel, we use, by the way, this is also another document. This is our passport. It's not a passport. It's actually a travel document. Right. It has the Lebanese flag here. Okay. So when we go to airports, they ask us, "You are Lebanese?" We tell them, "No, we are not Lebanese. We are Palestinians." So why there's the Lebanese flag here? Because the Lebanon authorities issued this. But you are Palestinians? Yes, but this is not Palestinian. So this is very confusing in the airports, because this is not Lebanese and not Palestinian. We don't have the Palestinian IDs or passports, because the Palestinian Authority have only ruling Gaza and the West Bank. They don't have a real role in the camps. So that's it. And the strange thing that this case is 73-year-old case, but it's not. It don't have the spotlight over the media.
Incredible, incredible. Thank you for showing us those. It opens more doors of amazement. But one thing that's very interesting in saying that is that so very often we pin ourselves to our identities that are printed out for us. So it's interesting that as Palestinians, you in your heart have an identity, and that is such an important thing. Also, what you were saying earlier about a lot of the refugees in Lebanon, in the Palestinian camps, are professionals, and I mean, as you rightly said, we know that the level of education amongst Palestinians is very high. And I think this is something really important to emphasize, because people out in Western countries, in the UK, across Europe, America, they see refugees and they think, what's that person got to offer? But actually, you've got so much to offer. So can I flip things over, because I know that you're also very passionate about entrepreneurship in the camp, and you're looking to help people unlock their potential, to help people to find a way forward. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Let me just make a short note about that Palestine is in our hearts. Now, if you if you go through the camps, through the streets of the camps, through the tight streets of the camps, you will listen the Palestinian accent still used till now, after 74 years. We are living outside Palestine, but the accent is still present. If you go to this neighborhood, you will find the names of the neighborhood, Safuri, Safad, the name of the cities in Palestine, our cities and our villages. So this is the neighborhood of Safuri, this is the neighborhood of Safad, of Dahri. So if you now, when someone is dead, when they, till now in the camps, they announce the names of people who died in the camp. They say, Flan, the name of someone from Safuri, from Safad, from the original village. The names of the schools, by the way, is the names of our cities and our villages. The names of football clubs, of everything till now. So this is number one. Regarding the potential of the youth, I've been a teacher for around 8 years for UNRWA. So I was teaching the university level students, the students who finish successfully the secondary level, and they are university level now. And they have amazing potential. They are very, very smart. They are very hard workers. They are amazing youth. But the problem they are down. The situation makes them down. The rules makes them down. The unemployment rate, the high unemployment rate makes them down. The situation, overall situation in Lebanon, the Lebanese people are struggling, by the way. They are extremely struggling. What about Palestinians? So they have great potential, but they are down. What we are trying to do is to maybe have some hope to create some hope for the youth, and to create maybe another path beside the unemployment and beside the other things. We are trying to now to raise the awareness about entrepreneurship and online revenue channels and something like this. And we are still working on this. It's really hard. It's very difficult, but there's a lot of potential to work on.
So what in the I lost the name, in the Badawi co-working space that's been set up in the camp, what are people able to do there?
So it's, as the name says, it's a co-working space, so youth can come. We call them wantrepreneurs. People who want to be entrepreneurs, they can use the space. We have a TV studio for YouTubers to create their own shows. We have desks for freelancers to work online from our space. We have a meeting room and a training room for trainers or for people who want to make meetings, and we create opportunities for them. We spotlight on some opportunities to be entrepreneurs, to maybe connect with the clients and with customers. This is the CSR of our work, of my company, our social responsibility, to maybe have our experience and our connections ready for the youth. We are trying to also have the Lebanese community and the Lebanese youth in contact with the Palestinian youth. It's going well till now, after 3 years. The programs we are doing inside the camp, 70% of the beneficiaries are Lebanese, which is something really good, because our message is for humans in general. And it's a good thing that Lebanese entrepreneurs come inside the camp and make contact with the Lebanese entrepreneurs. And this is something good. And they exchange experiences. And they got the benefits for our programs, both of them.
So it's a learning experience both for the refugees and for the Lebanese. This is something very, very positive.
Exactly. As I wish that the Lebanese community is open for the Palestinian refugees, I will also deal in the same way. I also provide programs for both, because we can't discriminate. Entrepreneurship is something that that brings people together, not to discriminate.
When I first heard that we were going to be talking and that you were based in Lebanon, and the word entrepreneurship wasn't the first word that sprang to mind when thinking of Lebanon, because we've been talking about the financial crisis and the problems, the broad problems that Lebanon has right now across the whole country. And it seems as though what you're doing now is something that's going to be very essential for the whole of the country when it gets itself back on its feet again.
I hope so. Now we are working on 3 levels. The first level is the Palestinian refugees inside the camp, inside Badawi camp and north camps, let's say, through our initiative, Badawi Working Space. The second level, as a part of our social responsibility towards our city, we call Tripoli our city, by the way, because our fathers born there, not us. So we call it our city, and we care about Tripoli, about our city. So we have a good collaboration with the Chamber of Commerce there. We have a program called Power Hour. It's a program to enhance the digital skills of the youth there. And we have collaborations with many other institutions.
So what are the alternatives? We were talking just before, and you were telling me that for the young people in the camps, that if they're not given a creative outlet, an entrepreneurial outlet, that's because unemployment is so high, they have very few options. So what is the youth of the camps actually able to do, and what are they, unfortunately, many of them having to do?
There's a lot of other institutions work with young boys, let's say, but the sector we are working on are the university graduates sector. In this sector, there's a huge problem now, the unemployment or illegal immigration. A lot of them are immigrating illegally, or now the drugs issue. Right. Last week, one of the youth in the camp killed his brother under the the overdose of drugs. So, and we think that this is something systemized because the spread of drugs is something crazy inside the camps, and it's rising year by year. So we are trying to create a new path for them.
Trying to create a positive goal for people to go towards. This is something which I think in many places people take their lives for granted, take opportunities for granted, and they don't care about making things better for others. And to have the situation that you're in, I'm sure you must feel that and you must see that you've made a real difference to many young people's lives.
We hope so, inshallah.
What sort of projects have been successful so far? Have they, coming out of the Badawi co-working space?
So basically, till now, we worked on 3 projects. The first project is empowering the youth to start their own business, and we have collaboration with the Chamber of Commerce in Tripoli. They were very collaborative in this. The second project is about the online freelancing. We also collaborated with our friend institution. It's called Muntada Plus, and we introduced the youth there to how to be online freelancers and get money from outside, fresh dollars. The third thing is, and it was all over Lebanon, not only in Badawi, even to Lebanese youth, it's about the online revenue channels in general. So around 720 youth attended our conference. It was called I Will Survive, because it was almost after the Beirut blast. And we trained them to how to get revenues online through 6 online revenue channels. We brought our friends who are experts in this and trained the youth there.
Well, it sounds wonderful. I wish you every strength and all our best to the people that are working at the Badawi camp. Let's hope that they go onwards and upwards. Hussein Zaid, thanks so much for joining us today here on The Edge.
Thank you, Andy.
Now, the United Nations Relief and Works Agency raises concern over Lebanon's rapid deterioration and its effects on Palestinian refugees fleeing their homeland due to illegal occupation. But facing bad living conditions in the country where they seek refuge is an unexplainable difficulty. We sincerely hope that conditions will improve with the international community's help and support. Now let's move on to speak about the abuse scandal in the Catholic Church. In France, the Catholic Church is facing a difficult reckoning following the conclusions of a report which estimates that at least 3,000 paedophiles operated as priests in the country over a period of 50 years. Our following infographic has more about the scandal. An independent probe into the extent of sexual abuse in the French Catholic Church suggests that clergy have abused children on an unprecedented scale until as recently as 2016.
The latest abuse scandal to hit the Roman Catholic Church suggests that clergy in France may have sexually abused children on an unprecedented scale for 70 years. An estimated 216,000 children until as late as 2016. The revelations came from an independent inquiry by the Church, which released its findings on Tuesday. It reports that since the 1950s, there have been about 2,900 to 3,200 suspected paedophiles in the French Church, and the number of victims may rise to 330,000 people when including abuse by members of the Church who are not clergy. Most of the victims were boys aged between 10 and 13. Jean-Marc Sauvé, who led the investigation, said the findings are damning and that the Church sometimes knowingly put children in touch with predators.
Un point majeur qu'il faut souligner, c'est...
A major point that must be underlined is that until the early 2000s, deep, total and even cruel indifference for years. The victims are not believed, are not listened to.
Who had been caught as offenders abroad or to different regions or to the dioceses. Now, it's only been out a couple of days. It's in French, 2,500 words. But I think one of the interesting things that I've been working out so far is there's variety by region and there's variety by different parts of the church. So the overall figure of 200,000 is bad, but it seems to be concentrated into particular parts of the church, which suggests that some pieces of the church were even worse than others. And that repeats the pattern from America, repeats the pattern from Australia.
And I was going to ask you, there have been so many recent revelations, most recently the Indigenous schools in Canada and so on, that wasn't specifically church-related, but there's so many sex abuse scandals coming out right now. What is the significance of the timing of this particular French revelation?
Well, I mean, it's not enough and it's coming too late. So what happened at the period that this inquiry began was that Pope Francis, in the face of much opposition across the western part of the church especially, started trying to change the church law to make it difficult for perpetrators, for the abusers, to get away with what they'd been doing. So, for example, for the first time ever, he said that if a bishop had failed to report this, or a priest had not been banned from the ministry, if they had done this, then that would be against church law. And then also he said that victims would have the right under church law to appeal to the local archbishop about a bishop, or to the local cardinal about an archbishop, if they had failed in their attempts to respond to the complaints about victims. And this move in church law provoked some councils of bishops in countries to respond by unleashing new inquiries. Now, the French response here from the church was lots of good words, but their first immediate reactions were to reject a recommendation in the report that any information gathered by priests should be shared with the authorities. And secondly, to say, yes, they would pay compensation, but they would be going into the pews to the mums and dads and aunties and uncles of the victims and asking them to have extra collections to pay for the compensation. So it seems to me they've done well to get this report done independently by a top quality team, well to gather the evidence, but deep down there's still a systemic problem. And we see that in the UK as well, where only last November there was a major apology on the part of the bishops after a major government inquiry into the Catholic Church's role in child sex abuse, with some horrendous case studies. And yet, as recently as 3 weeks ago, one of the bishops was moving priests who were known to be abusers, and the papal nuncio was sharing with local bishops the complaints of victims, where the victims had reached out to the papal ambassador. So there's still a long way to go here, not only in France, but across the piece.
Can I ask you, child abuse is something which isn't new, and it's been going on for hundreds of years, probably since the beginning of societies. So this is nothing new, and it's not just a Catholic Church issue, I'm certain, sadly. But are these revelations? We keep hearing of allegations against the Church and things happening within the Church. Is this because of the systems that exist, and that the systems have been protecting the perpetrators throughout all this time?
Yeah, and I ought to put my comments in context. I come out of this community myself, and I've served on its national and international advisory boards. So in this sense, it's a criticism within as well as trying to be objective. Child abuse, abuse of minors, exists in almost every community. And so it's not surprising if you have a community globally that reaches 2.5 billion people, that there will be some people in it that have that illness, yes, and then go about this practice of abuse. It seems to me that the true scandal, and this is something that the bishops hate to be told, is not actually that there are abusers in the Church, because you would expect in the world of football, in the world of media, in the world of religion, for this to happen. The true scandal is that when this has happened, the system has covered it up again and again. And the bishops seem to want to claim all religious authority, but take no responsibility for these challenges. And so that's the kind of the pressure that Pope Francis is trying to drive through, to change the religious law, to change the reporting, to shed oxygen and to shed light on the behavior of the bishops and the superiors, so that when a case does come forward, the person that's been doing the abuse can be dealt with quickly and got to treatment, and the victim has much less damage done to them and gets the right support and the right psychological help. And that's got to come through every institution, whether that's the Anglican, the Church of England Church in England, whether that's the Football Association who had this problem. And, some youth movements have been incredibly effective at stamping this problem out, because they've taken that issue of transparency, good systems, good procedures, good training very, very, very seriously. And they've gone from being high-risk youth movements to zero-risk youth movements. But the Catholic Church, in the main, is still struggling to be on that journey. And I think one of the things that the report points out is that when these young people came forward, these 10 to 13-year-old boys, and said this had happened, very often the first working assumption of those they spoke to was somehow they must have wanted it, somehow they must have been complicit in this. And so another dimension of this is that in some of the Catholic training colleges for clergy, the teaching about this sort of space until about 1970 was very much out of date. So Catholic clergy until 1970 were trained in the confessional. If a young woman came into the confessional and said, "Father, I've been raped," that the first question they must ask is, "Did you enjoy it?" And this was to establish whether or not she was complicit in this act. Yeah. And so it's system, it's training, it's opportunity, and it's copying the standards that the best organisations in the world have done. Church is not alone, but the church has had some particular problems.
Absolutely. Well, as they say, evil thrives in the darkness, and shining a light on bad experiences is also important to bring it out. And although Pope Francis was criticised for early on delaying his commitment to solving this, it does appear that things are moving in the right direction now. Francis Davis, thank you so much for joining us today and giving us your perspectives. The Catholic Church of France said in March that it will propose some form of financial aid to victims, and Pope Francis said that he was ashamed of the fact that over 200,000 children have been sexually abused in the French churches since 1950. Coming days will show what steps the authorities will finally take. Now let's move on to our last topic to speak about the political crisis in Tunisia, where President Kais Saied had long been revered by the people of his country for his old-school style and communication with ordinary citizens, a stark change from the old political class. But who is Kais Saied? Our following infographic explains. Authorities in Tunisia have seized and sealed the broadcasting equipment of a television station which was close to the Ennahda party.
Tunisian security forces seized broadcasting equipment from Zitouna TV on the pretext it was operating illegally, as the crisis deepens after the country's leader cemented his rule by issuing new decrees and furiously silencing opponents. Zitouna's head of production said the security forces raided the headquarters of Zitouna Network, which produces programmes for Zitouna TV and other channels, and began confiscating equipment. Zitouna TV is considered close to Al-Karama and Ennahda, the two biggest parties in the parliament opposed to President Kais Saied. Saied, in July, suspended Parliament, sacked the Ennahda-supported government and removed MPs' immunity following months of public anger over an ongoing economic crisis and failings in managing the coronavirus pandemic. Zitouna TV started broadcasting in 2012, while in 2015 some of its equipment was seized, but it still continued to operate.
Demonstrators continue to protest against President Kais Saied's seizure of power, calling on him to step down. The crisis has endangered the democratic gains that Tunisians won in 2011 revolution, and has slowed efforts to tackle an urgent threat to public finances. The coming weeks will show if the situation will calm down in the country. Our analysts have provided their insights on today's top stories. Let's have a roundup of what they had to say. Now, before closing our programme, let's take a look at social media to hear your voices and reactions on today's top story, shared with the hashtag Palestine. And here's what you've been saying about Palestine on Twitter. Isa Ahmed Mukhtar says, "It's so adorable. Iran will support Palestine either way." A Palestinian wrestler who does not have a coach at the World Wrestling Championships in Norway and comes alone trains with an Iranian coach, Abdel Balitabar, before the match. Adamir says, "At any time, Israel can detain any Palestinian indefinitely under an administrative detention order. Stand with the Palestinian political prisoners by exposing Israel's constant violation of Palestinian human rights." And Juliruki Putnik says, "Palestine, history, culture, heritage, faith and beauty. There is no nation that so suffer from aggression and oppression as the Palestinians." Let's now take a look at our video of the day, which shows the ways you can help refugees. And that's all for this episode of The Edge with me, Andy Boynes. Stay tuned as we'll be back tomorrow with more in-depth analysis on the top stories and a look beyond the edge.